This is Elizabeth from Holly Press Fibers, and I thought it might be fun to hop on here. I haven't been on in a long time, but I thought it might be fun to hop on here and talk about how different skeins of yarn knit up differently. So most of these yarns are in my shop, but I wanted to get on here and show you the layouts of the different yarn and how they're going to, or at least could, knit up. And in the process, I'm probably going to be throwing yarn every which way, but I'm also going to open it up and talk about how it's dyed is going to help you determine how it's going to knit up. If you're going to get something that's more of a striping pattern, like these, something that's not necessarily striping, but at the same time, it's not an all over, what speckles might look like, what something that is more tonal with speckles might look like. So I'll move these out of the way and I'll try my hardest not to be hitting the tripod as we go. So I'm going to start with showing you some speckles here. Almost everything I'm going to show you is in the shop, but not all of it. If something's not in the shop, I'll try to let you know. But the most important thing to take away from this is what something's going to actually knit up like. Okay, here are the various ones that we can look at. Some of these are just straight up speckles, and they are on natural yarn. They take on just a little bit of the bleed color from the speckles. Others, I've added a wash of color with some speckles. And let's see. Sorry for any pauses. I've got so much yarn laid out here. It's going to take me a while to find everything. Here is a speckle that goes with this. This is created mostly by spot speckling, and the colors come out, fairly uniform. So you're not going to have any blotches of the speckles, whereas this one is over here, also does the same thing. So even though this one has more blotches of speckles, it still came out as an all-over colorway. Now that, in contrast to something like this, this is going to have blotches of speckles. It does have some color washes in there along with it, but it is going to come out similar to something like this, but of course in the colors that you're seeing on here. You can also look at the amount of color that's in a skein to determine how bold it's going to be. This one has more color in it, with only some lighter or some smaller light areas compared to this one, which does have more, there we go, more of the lighter areas. But again, this shouldn't be striping. It'll just be maybe a little bit of this flashing. You see the pinks right there versus some of the purples over here. Also, a good thing to note is this will change depending on how many stitches you have in the round and what size needle you're using, your gauge. A lot of this, though, is just a general guideline. Okay, so then if we look at something like this, this is going to give you more of an overall color of these aquas because that is the predominant color. Here we have lots of different colors, so we ended up with lots of different colors. Here we've got the yellows and those aquas. So it's going to be less dense, sort of, as this is also a less dense color than this. Okay, back to some of these. we've got our color washes in with the speckles for both of these. So you're going to see less of the speckling because there's really not that much going on in there for the speckles, but more of the color wash. So they're going to be mellow. Same with something like this. You're going to see predominantly blue, very little of the green, and a lot of that white. Okay, now I want to take us to something totally different. And we'll look more at our stripe options and how to determine if something's going to stripe. This is probably one of the main questions I get is, is this going to stripe? Is this going to flash? Well, it's really going to depend on a couple things. It's going to depend not only on how it was dyed and how much of each colorway was laid down. It's also going to depend on something as specific as where you start in the skein. So I started these socks, this colorway, at one point, and I was ending up with splotches of blue, splotches of yellow, splotches of white. So that flashing. And that's because of where I started in the skein. I went back, started over, and I ended up with a striping. So that noted, if you start knitting something and you go, I hate the way this is looking, whether it's the striping or the flashing, everybody likes something different, right? Stop, go back to where you had a start on that skein. I think I've already trimmed this one. Yeah, so there's the blue from the top. It looks like I might have started somewhere in the blue since I have not cleaned that up yet. So I probably started in the blues or the purples, and that started a striping pattern. So just pick a different start spot for your cast on, and that can change the overall look of how it turns out, which is kind of cool to know. If you start something, you're like, ugh, this is not what I was anticipating. Just try again at a different part of that color repeat. So I also wanted to talk about how you determine, is this going to stripe, or is it going to be a little bit more of an overall color that you're not seeing a stripe that jumps out at you? One thing to look for in your skein is, do you have an obvious white patch? That is definitely going to make a stripe stand out. It's also important to look at how long each repeat is. So my husband's probably not going to be happy with me, but we're going to open these up. He's my skeiner, so he's going to be re-skeining these for me. Oops, tossed the wrong thing off to the side. Okay, so if we look at, making a mess of it, he'll make it pretty for me again, how much white space we have compared to the colors and the number of colors. The more colors you have and where they're spaced on the yarn is going to tell you, is this going to stripe? Is this going to stand out in a different way? Okay, open up one more here. My husband just came and closed the door because he's going to be doing something potentially noisy out there. Okay. All right, so let's look at first this one. This is Rabbit Tobacco, and it ended up looking like this. So to me, I'm seeing a stripe pattern there. It's not a super bold stripe pattern for sure, but you definitely see a line of the color. And that's because out of your length, you're going to have, gosh, that's about 8 inches of one color. Then we had a short transition of white speckles. We had less than 8 inches of purple. And again, up here, we've got short transitions of white, about 8 inches. So yeah, you've got your changes happening in about 8-inch segments for the main colors with a little bit of white. and that produced this. Now, let me grab another one. Let's see. This would be Matthew, I think it's Matthew Insists on puff sleeves, or it's named like that. Let me see if I can find the, I already tossed the label. I know it's Matthew and puffed sleeves, so it's an Anne of Green Gables. So here we've got, I know that the span here is about 8 inches, so 8 inches. Then we've got a white segment with a light 8 inches white segment, a little bit more than 8 inches. So again, we're getting that striping pattern because of how these colors are laid out and where they are. Those whites really make the blue periwinkle and the green pop. If that white wasn't there and it was another, say, complementary color, it may not be as noticeable that it's a stripe. And I've had some customers say that theirs just flashed all the way down. And again, that's where you started in your color. Okay, so we know that those 8-inch segments are doing something for us. Let's look at this one. I don't have a sample of this, but we're going to get a fairly good idea of what it's going to do just by looking at it. So if you're looking at yarn online, you can have an idea. Oops, there we go. 8 inches. Ooh, that's going to give us a nice big, yeah, so you're going to end up with a stripe of red for sure. 8 inches there. We've got some nice whites. And then I'm hoping I'm getting this in screen as I'm going so quick. And the green also. So yes, this will stripe. Oh, I do have this one. I was going to say, this looks very familiar. This is Christmas at Hilltop. So yeah, there's our striping. I don't know why I didn't think I had this one. Something totally different. Let's look at something that's basically a tonal. This is probably one of my more tonal colorways. We've got some speckling in there. And this is how it turns out. So you got some color in there, some variation, but it doesn't scream flashing, even though you can see on the screen from a distance, it really doesn't, your eye is not drawn to that. And in pattern work, it doesn't take away from it. If I were to do a pattern like this, in say something like this, my pattern is not going to shine. It's going to just kind of look like a lump of extra random stitches. So I always try to stay with something more in the tonal or lightly speckled if I'm going to be doing something like cable work. I think I might have said color work a second ago. Cable or even texture. Okay, so I'm going to grab out a couple more that are fairly tonal. So all of these are going to knit up fairly tonal. They're going to have white patches, so they're not going to be as, well, I guess solid as this one, which you'd expect, right? I'm trying to look around at the same time and find something that's the right sample. This one's not in the shop right now. It's a little bit more than what you're seeing here since these don't have many colors, but it didn't take away from the texture on this sock. Here is a colorway that's similar to that, and this is what it came out as. So we went from something that was more tonal based on very few speckles to something that's more definite speckle, definite wash. So let's see, this one does not have speckles in it, and this is what it created. So those washes of colors. This has some speckles in it, but very light and not distracting. Same with this one. Okay, And if you like the way this looks, this is it in, you could also see what it would end up looking like in purples instead of blues. Or another, let me clear this so your eyes don't get bogged down with all the crazy. Here's one that's more tonal because it's got more variation in color, and that's what it ends up looking like. So choosing a yarn like this is not as tricky in figuring out what it's going to look like as, say, choosing one that looks like this or this. You have a good idea that you're going to have an overall peach, pink, purple look. And you don't have to worry about the striping so much. And that's partly because it's an all-over color with very little white space. It's that white space or a definite contrast of color that's going to make something stand out as a stripe. Let's see, I have one more that also falls sort of in that category of you know what you're going to get fairly easily. Okay. Grab these out of the way, and I wanted to head back to talking about these again. So when I'm looking at these, like if I was in a yarn store or if I was shopping online, it's easier of course in a yarn store, but we can't all get to a yarn store or they don't carry what we're interested in. So if I was looking at this, what's one clue I can get just by it sitting here? We'll do it that way first. Just by it sitting here, what's a clue that I can get if this is going to stripe or not? So I'm going to turn it this way so we can see the whole thing. I'm looking at it and I'm seeing white here, starting with some green, pops here green. Where's my next one coming out? Well, there and there. So I can tell this has got a decent stripe of green, and then it's got this periwinkle purples that's also following through. So just being able to see every other twist in here, I can tell that the color is going to be a longer repeat. They're not just flashes of color. Let me see if I can find one that's got more flashes of color. I've already started throwing everything around here. This one has shorter bits of color. Even though I can see purple, I'm not seeing long repeats of the colors. And it turned out looking like this. So those shorter repeats of color are less likely to stripe, whereas the longer repeats are going to be more likely to stripe. And if you're at a yarn store, you know, you can ask them if you are allowed to open up a skein. They may or may not be okay with that. But if you are in a yarn store, you can also, you know, just be going, okay, green, where does that go to? Green to green. Okay, purple, and then follow it through. Purples, and you start to get a decent idea. And then also looking at how much is white or a strong contrast. Is that going to stripe? So I'm going to open this guy up here so we can see if it follows any trend that let it not jump out as being striping. Okay, the first thing that we're going to see is there's more colors in here. We're going from pinks to purples to peaches to yellows to greens, back to the yellow to some peaches. How long are each of these? Well, let's see. This green is very light. That's going to make a difference in if something screams striping. This whole skein is not a high contrast skein. Yeah, the colors change, but you're not getting a bright color against another bright color with a contrast of whites or blacks against it. So, yep, we've got a nice long stripe of green, nice long stripe of your peaches yellows, big chunk of purples and pinks, and again, your yellows and peaches. And so it was a good portion of not having chunks of white, but also having multiple colors. The opposite can be true though. I had browns in here and some oranges, but since it's the overall pink, you're not getting the striping. Okay, let's look at something like this. If I was going to be looking at this one online, is this going to stripe or not? Well, I've got various colors in here. I guess I should just leave it one way in case you only have one picture to look at, right? You've got blues, and I can see on the not alternating, but the next twist over, a little bit of blue right there, some blue here, and some of the blues and teals down here. Whereas here I've got my maybe burgundies and oranges, and that's popping up here as well, here as well. So is this going to stripe, or is it going to be enough of the same intensity? Oops, I'm not done with that sock. I still have to weave in the end. So yeah, we've got up close, you can see that that blue left a striping pattern there. In texture work, that's what it looks like. But overall, does that scream, I'm a striped sock? Not really, but it was because everything was about the same saturation, the same light dark, not a huge contrast. Let's open it up and see what the color repeat looks like. Okay, so we had some transitioning from one color hue to another one. That gave us about an 8-inch segment. We go a little bit darker, we'd pick up a different color, a little darker again. We've got this segment here, and then our blues. So this skein is going to create something that is less likely to pop out as striped. But you are going to up close see that pattern. This is one of those that you can see the colors weaving through, but again, it doesn't scream striped, but you do see each line of color, which is pretty fun. Looking at the skein, I can see my pinks and oranges, pinks, then the next alternating pink, coming up here pink, my lighter colors with greens, greens, and I'm looking at it going, okay, how many colors do I have in here? I've got my pinks, my yellows, sort of peaches, some greens and yellows. The more colors you have, the less white space you have, the less likely it's going to stripe. It could pool, it could flash. Again, just try starting at a different point in your skein if that's not the look you're wanting to go for. Okay, here is another one. This could very easily turn out the way this one did. Let's see how many colors. We've got oranges, sort of a yellowish, rusty color. Our purples, greens. This one is likely to look fairly crazy, just because you've got warm colors, you've got something that's leaning more towards the cool, even though it's still vibrant. They're all about the same light dark, they're all about the same like level of saturation. So you're going to see these early fall colors being very bright and vivid. Okay, here are several more. Kind of just have these off to the side for us to talk about. So this one, this is going to predominantly come off with the lighter background with pops of color. So you're going to end up with something that's maybe a little bit similar to this, only with more white space, or at least light space in there. When you compare these, you can see there's some white in there. It's mostly washed over with a color. This one has more of the light, but it's definitely not going to pop out as striped. Now taking this in comparison to this one has a little bit more in the way of colors. You've got the teals, the greens, sort of a bluish. We'd have less white space, but it is also going to have a all over look. Now this, by comparison, has definite space dyeing. So you can see you've got your blues and your lighter colors, your definite bits of burnt orange there. So let's open this one up. I don't have one to compare it to for a finished sock, but let's see what it looks like. And there we go. Yep, this one is most likely going to have a striping pattern because we have a big segment of this blue to almost light blue white and a big segment of the speckling, then the browns into the burnt oranges. So this one is very likely to have a striping pattern, or depending on where you start in the skein, you will see flashing or pooling. This one is also very likely to stripe for you. Now it could just do a nice general color, but I am guessing you're going to see striping. You've got 3 approximately colors in here. So if we lay this out, what have we got? We've got a nice big area of this color, of the yellow woodsy color, nice big area of pink, and a very big area of green. This will stripe depending on where you start. Now let's compare that to this. I have a picture of these. I think they're my husband's socks, so I will have to find a picture before he started using them. But this also has that same 3 color, and I will try to pop in a picture to let you see what it looks like. This one, I'm going to lay it out how it's probably in the pan. So we've got our nice goldens into our oranges, reds, browns. So we've got a nice chunk of brown there. Transition, and a nice chunk of this yellow. So this would have looked definitely more stripy. It's got almost 4 colors when you look at it, going from that brown, red, orange, yellow, whereas this one basically had 3 colors. These will both have stripy looks. Oh, my husband is going to be so thrilled. Well, I just wanted to go over what we have that's Christmassy and how they might knit up. Some of them, like that one, very obvious. Some of them maybe not so much. Okay, so this one is going to come off very, oops, sorry, I bumped that, very similar to this, except it's got a chunk of green in it. And you're looking at this going, okay, but how much green? That's not much green, right? Well, if we open it up, you're going to see we've got 2 chunks of green, because in the way this one is skeined up, we've got it, I'll show you there, the green coming out here, that's one end. Here's another end that has it. So both of these ends are going to have a chunk of green. So it's going to be something similar to this in terms of your speckling and your colors, but it's going to have about maybe an inch or 2 of the green popped in there. Trying to see if I have any other sample socks that might give you an idea. Might be sort of like combining these two in terms of you're going to get several stitches of green, and then you're going to get lots of speckles, and then several stitches of green. So that one is Spode Christmas Tree. Now an all over speckle, of course, is just going to look more along the lines of something like this. You're going to get that nice like pinky color coming through, a little bit of a yellowish color coming through, but then these bright little speckles that are going to make it really happy. Now this one, we can see it runs through with reds, all the way. So you're going to end up with a definite candy cane striping here, going from those whites with speckles to the reds and the pinks with speckles. This one will be slightly less candy cane, but definitely still have a candy cane effect, because we've got that lighter white pink with these bright fuchsias and reds. So it's going to candy cane, maybe not as dramatically as this one. Now this one will also be more of a candy cane stripe, because we've got these big swaths of color that are contrasting with our red and our green. Obviously, this is going to be a green sock with speckles. So you're going to end up with something that's a tonal color like you would find here, but with less speckling, because this one had speckles like that compared to this. These are going to pop more because they contrast more with that light Grinch green. And then this colorway also is sort of a space dyed speckle. So let's open this one up. I hope this has kind of helped you feel a little bit more confident about buying yarn, whether it's in a store or online, that you have an idea when it's all skeined up what it might do for you when you're knitting it up. So this one is space dyed, so you've got a big chunk of those purples and burgundies, a nice contrast that's bare for the most part, and then some greens in 2 different colors. This is going to be more likely to have a striping look, pooling or flashing as well. Okay, I hope that this was helpful, and I wish you guys a happy day. Thank you for spending some time with me. Bye.